everyone, this is Jeffrey Smith, and I'm with my friend Kiran Krishnan. Kiran is an expert at the microbiome and so many ways that our system functions. Welcome, Kiran.
Hi, thank you, Jeffrey, so much for having me, especially in this very, very critical time that we're all in. So thank you.
Yeah, I've had you when we did the Healing from GMOs and Roundup, because the product that you developed actually helps balance the gut bacteria after it's been damaged by Roundup, and you've done the research to show that. And I've had you on the 90-day lifestyle upgrade program, talking about that, as well as the prebiotic that enhances the work of the probiotic. And now we're talking about overall health. We have 5 different products you're recommending for the medicine cabinet during this time, and you have very specific reasons, and we're going to go into detail. But first, what's the takeaway on this pandemic virus that you'd like to share right off the top?
Yeah, so, 2 really important things. One is this virus and this pandemic really illuminates a significant vulnerability and weakness in our society.
Mm-hmm.
And that's within our own health system, our own biology, if you will. This virus, like other viruses in the family, targets a receptor called the ACE2 receptor. And that receptor flags tissues that are undergoing repair from damage and thus are compromised. So the virus is smart enough to have developed this system of finding the most compromised parts of your body and then honing in on it. And that's what it uses to bind and enter in.
That's kind of like an ex-partner, like an ex-husband or an ex-wife. They know the vulnerabilities and they hone it.
They know your weaknesses, right? And I mean, it's amazing. So there's 2 parts of what we have that the virus really takes advantage of. Because number one, keep in mind that the biggest source of transmission is from our dirty hands, from touching things where there's other people's respiratory droplets, and then touching our face, right? Getting it into our nose, mouth, or eyes. Now, why that is so significant is because if you look at humans, on average, we touch our face in an hour somewhere around 40 times, right? So that's just a behavior.
By the way, who's going to measure that? I mean, they look with a little pen. Okay, he touched it. Did you see that? Did you see that? He touched it. Someone has a master's degree or a PhD because of that 40 number.
Because of that, totally. Somebody watched endless videos of people just doing nothing and counting how many times they touch their face.
All right, I'm gonna say, no one out there should be counting the times we touch our face during this interview. I don't want to hear about it. Okay, I'm touching my face. I'm at home. I'm alone. Okay. Go ahead.
They're gonna post on that. Someone's starting to count right now. So stop counting. So that's one vulnerability we have. Just by nature we do that, right? And so since this virus is typically on your hands and it's getting into that route, the second vulnerability is we have this amazing flag and marker on our cells that indicates a compromised constitution, and that flag is this ACE2 receptor. Anytime your body's going through lots of chronic inflammation because you have heart disease, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, you've got autoimmune conditions, allergies, asthma, all of those things that are...
You've just named most of America. Go ahead.
Totally. Metabolic syndrome is now a big known risk factor for a serious adverse event to this virus. That's just came out in an article today now based on CDC data. All of those things are underscored by chronic low-grade inflammation. And that chronic low-grade inflammation, a big driver of that is leakiness in the gut and the immune dysfunction. So this chronic low-grade inflammation, which in large part is driven by leaky gut, and there's lots of studies on that all of these risk factor conditions that we're talking about now that make you have a higher chance of having an adverse response to COVID-19, like heart disease, obesity, autoimmune conditions, asthma, chronic respiratory illness, and so on, all of those are driven in large part by transient permeability in your intestines and the chronic low-grade inflammation that comes about it, right? So think about this. You've got chronic low-grade inflammation, which is really abundant in our population. That chronic low-grade inflammation causes tissue damage all over your body on the inside. That tissue damage is signaled by the presence of this ACE2 receptor, which is part of your repair system that your body's using. That ACE2 receptor is the beacon for the virus. This is where it docks to get into your cell. So the virus has developed this ability to find and detect vulnerable systems.
It reminds me of Star Wars. They had all these clones or thing, and they were programmed. And so let's get them out there all over the galaxy to help. And then it's like code 7 or whatever, and then they switched and they became negative. So the ACE2 is sent all around to deal with the low-grade inflammation, but then it becomes the Trojan horse because the virus attaches to it.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So the viruses learn that, hey, if there's an ACE2 receptor being expressed, it means that that tissue is compromised and that inflammation is going on there. And these types of viruses do well in the presence of inflammation. And so it hones in on those risk factors, and that's what gives it the chance to find lots of targets in your body to bind, to go into, to produce more virus, and then cause this infection. So then the actual takeaway when you look at that is, hey, our constant vulnerability that we have, it's the same thing that drives chronic illness, which is what's killing way more of us than the COVID-19 just yet. So once this is done, and we will get through this, right? When we get to the other side of it, if we can keep that awareness and that understanding of this vulnerability and start making practices to reduce that vulnerability, not only may it help us during the pandemic, but it will pay off in spades down the line with all the other chronic illnesses we have to worry about once this is gone.
Beautiful.
So that's the first takeaway, yeah.
So what, and this is partly my message too, is to whatever the level of severity here, I don't need to comment on it. I'm not an expert, but we can use this time when we're focusing on health and have time on our hands and are looking at changes in our lives, which is a natural thing during these upheavals. Let's emerge with a healthier set of habits and with a healthier body.
Absolutely. That's my second takeaway from it in a nutshell is that, there are programs like this that are so important for people to watch and listen to because they're going to get little pearls of wisdom out of these things, tips on things to have on hand, behaviors to change that not only will prepare you for this current situation, but will be a significant part of what makes you healthier, better, and stronger for the rest of your life. So the second takeaway is implement at least 2 or 3 habits that you don't typically do, but start doing it now while you have the time and the focus and make them ingrained in your behavior. Because then once this is passed, and this will pass, when we get out into back to normal world, if those habits stay, you're going to live a much healthier, longer life.
Fantastic. So we've been experiencing since we started, the internet froze twice. And so we don't know how long we have.
Right.
And so I'm going to ask for a summary of the 5 items that are available through Just Thrive. And we've worked out a situation where we're giving discounts to everyone through Just Thrive, and they're supporting our work of education. I'd like you to summarize the 5 items. And then if our internet is working with us afterwards, we can dive deeper into some of my favorites of those 5. I know all about the 5, but let's talk about first the probiotic. And I have to say, by the way, that you're unique in my experience in how much research you do on products. You don't just say, oh, well, we know that this probiotic does this, and therefore we'll combine it with this, and we'll expect this, and we'll sell it. You actually have, how many research studies have you done or are ongoing right now?
So we have 7 now published, and we have, I think, 12 still ongoing.
Wow.
So we have a lot of work. And one just published last week, and this was on triglycerides. And the probiotic being able to significantly reduce triglycerides by almost 38% in a 90-day period.
All right. So I'm going to ask you to speed date each of these 5 products. Okay, let's talk about the probiotic, the spores. What is it? We've talked about it a lot. We've done hour-long talks on it, done updates on it, but give me the speed dating version of the probiotic.
Yeah, so 2 things to mention with it that are really important to take away. Number 1 is, remember, one of the biggest sources of chronic low-grade inflammation in the body is through leaky gut. There's no question about that if you look at the research. This is the only probiotic so far that has published human clinical trials showing that it alleviates that leaky gut.
Beautiful.
So it's going to really help all of us to just stop that leakiness, which provides a source of inflammation in the body. Number 2, 80% of your immune tissue is in your gut. And unless you have a healthy, diverse microbiome, then the immune system in the gut gets compromised. And the immune system in the gut is a central command center for the response throughout the rest of the body. So you need a healthy, diverse microbiome with lots of things like short-chain fatty acids, which really support the immune system. So we need to make sure the command center is healthy, and that's a second really important function of the probiotic.
Beautiful. I'll add, it increases diversity, it
Mhm.
reduces the pathogens, it increases the superhero strains, which we've talked about. It's one of my favorite, it's my favorite topic to talk about with you, as well as what it does to a gut that's been compromised with Roundup. The Roundup changes, and we went through this very quickly. I went through 28 different conditions that people reported getting better from when they switched to non-GMO and organic food. And I said, will the changes that you've seen in the gut microbiome contribute towards any of these? And all of them you were able to do with rapid fire answer all of the biochemistry of why that's the case. And so we actually have evidence that it can support the microbiome, and especially with its damage from Roundup. Okay,
Yeah.
the internet's being a little unstable, so we're going to go on to the next speed dating. Are we done with the probiotic?
Yes, I think that's
Okay.
enough good information for them.
Okay, the prebiotic.
Yeah, so prebiotic is critical as really important food, and this particular for the bacteria, but this particular prebiotic is even more special because it specifically feeds certain groups of bacteria within the microbiome, and it's feeding those superhero strains that we've talked about, the Akkermansia, the Fecalum bacteria. Those particular strains are inversely correlated to chronic illness, and so the higher levels of those strains you have, the more protected you are against numerous conditions that are underscored by chronic low-grade inflammation. So it's very important in this time to be able to provide your probiotic, your commensal bacteria, with the right food source to maintain a healthy environment.
All right, so you feed the bugs and you feed the what feeds the bugs.
Yep.
I want to know the number. What if you get just the probiotics, it has one level of effect.
Yep.
If you get the prebiotics, how much more effective? Do you have the numbers there in terms of its impact?
So that's the beauty of doing actual scientific research and publication. We know the impact, right? So if you use just the probiotic, let's look at postbiotics that are really important that are being made by these superhero strains. One of them is butyrate. And then the level of these strains. We'll talk about both. So the postbiotics that are increased by just taking the probiotic increases by about 50%. When you add in the prebiotic, it goes up to 150%. So it's a huge compounding effect. When you look at the number or the amount of these superhero strains, we increase it typically by about 10-fold when you use just the probiotic, which in itself is an amazing amount, right? 10-fold. Then we saw when you add in the prebiotic, it goes up to 100 to 1,000-fold increase of these superhero strains. And all of this that we've studied is in 3 weeks, right? So the changes can be very profound in a short period of time.
Okay, I want to tell you that this prebiotic, it comes with a little tiny amount. You add in a big thing of water, and you can sit it on your desk, and you can sip it throughout the day. It is super sweet, and so if you can dilute it more, but and it also, although some are derived from dairy products, it has no dairy protein. Is that right?
Yeah, there's one of the prebiotics that comes from dairy. It's called a gluco-oligosaccharide. But you remove all of the dairy proteins and all from it. So it's just the oligosaccharide, which is a type of carbohydrate. So none of the dairy proteins that cause people sensitivity are present in that at all.
So I was giving someone who had visited a bunch of old supplements and powders and stuff for themselves and their family, and they accidentally took my prebiotic.
Accidentally?
I looked around and said, "Did you take that? Oh, I thought it was part of the gift." And he said, "But my kids love it." Anyway, so there goes my prebiotic, but I got some more. Okay, the next, IgG.
Yeah, so super important. This is immunoglobulin G. This is a serum-derived product where it's an immunoglobulin. In fact, it's an antibody that's produced by B cells, similar to what IgG we would have in our system. What's really great about this is they have studies on HIV-infected patients, on other viral challenges, showing that when you take this and it goes into your gut, it dramatically modulates the immune response in the gut, reducing the inflammatory type of response. And it helps bind up things like bacterial toxins, viral particles, mold toxins, and so on. So it brings down the toxic load within your body, and it brings down the work that your immune system has to do. So, not only is it, of course, then binding and neutralizing lots of things in your system that can be toxigenic, which can compromise your immune response. But it also supports the right part of your immune response to handle this novel kind of infection that's coming in. And I want to be clear, we're not saying it's a treatment for COVID-19. There's no studies on that, but there are studies on its ability to help your body deal with other toxicity and other infection, and supports the immune system in a very profound way.
Beautiful. And, IgG, it's something that we normally produce as part of our immune system. So we're just adding the body more ammo. It's like,
yeah, exactly. Just giving it more ammo, giving it the body more support to not only, because, if you ever get exposed to COVID, it's not the only thing your body's dealing with at that time, right? We still have the cold and flu viruses going on, mold toxins, GMOs that you may be eating, everything else, gluten, all kinds of things are triggering inflammation in the body constantly. So the COVID-19 is not going to be the only condition your body's fighting at the time. So this will help provide support for all the other things that the body has to do. So hopefully the immune system can focus a little bit on this new novel pathogen.
Beautiful. The fourth is K2-7. It sounds like a ski run from it.
Right.
K2. All right.
A ski run down the second tallest mountain in the world. It's K2, right? And it's the run number 7, which is the
right,
death
exactly.
run. No, this is so important. K2-7 is an essential nutrient. It's a vitamin. It is really important for mitochondrial health. It's the only thing that takes calcium from the bloodstream and sticks it on the bone. It's also the only thing that removes calcium from the soft tissue. It is associated when you look at long-term longitudinal studies. We're talking about studies that are 10 years long, with up to 13,000 patients, some massive studies. They show that it increases longevity by a significant amount of time, about 6 to 7 years, reduces cardiovascular mortality by 50%, reduces all-cause mortality by 25%. These are the published studies.
You're not. Wait. Every one of those things is like a grand slam.
It's profound, right?
Nothing
Nothing else.
So how many years of increased life, Karen?
Between 6 and 7 years, it increases your longevity.
Well, I'm already too old for that. I guess
no, it's actually never too late.
Well, I have some, but I haven't been taking it every day. I'm admitting. All right, it's increased its value in my. I'm changing.
It's amazing. So it's something like the Rotterdam study, which is a K2 study, 10-year study, right, with 4,800 patients. Mm-hmm. This is a massive study. They showed that just taking a minimal amount, that is about 9% of the K2 that's in the K2 product that Just Thrive has. It reduced cardiovascular mortality by 50%. Right? Nothing else has ever been shown to do that.
This is incredible.
50%.
Why don't they teach this in grade school? I mean, this is like water. This is like air.
It's so basic. In the Heidelberg cohort study, showed that it increased all-cause mortality by over 30% and reduced the risk for a number of different cancers. And Heidelberg cohort studies, 13,800 patient study. It's not a tiny study. And we're looking at prostate cancer risk reducing by 30%, breast cancer risk, all of these things from this one vitamin.
You know, right? Why we haven't heard about it? Because it's not a pharmaceutical.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, there's lots of billions of dollars to be made treating these things with pharmaceuticals. So you're not going to hear about it that widely, but you will hear. And why is that so important right now? Well, number one, because it is an essential nutrient. It's really important for your mitochondria to function. That's one of the areas we've been doing research in, and we have published in this area, showing that vitamin K2 upregulates the powerhouse of your cell, the mitochondria, and makes your cells all function better. And that includes all your immune cells as well. So that's one thing. The second thing is lots of people are increasing their uptake of vitamin D. Which is important for your antiviral part of your immune system. The thing about vitamin D is that if you have high amounts of vitamin D, it strips your body of K2 because vitamin D and K2 work together. So if you're increasing your intake of vitamin D, you definitely need to bring up your intake of vitamin K2 because vitamin D will have a lot of benefits, but if you strip your K2, you're going to cause a lot more problems down the road. So that's just a critical one that people should be taking now and never stop taking it because of what it does for us long term.
Well, I don't mind adding some years to my life. That's fun.
And it's good years, it's healthy years, with
Yeah.
with less cardiovascular disease, with less Alzheimer's, all of those things K2 has been studied against.
Yeah, I wish you had told me about the mitochondrial thing earlier because I'm always looking for things that link to Roundup and GMOs, and we know that Roundup damages the mitochondria. And if I had known that, I would have focused on that 3 years ago, and I would have been taking it for 3 years. But no,
We were holding out on you, but
you owe
now
me some months of my life, man. All
totally.
right. Okay,
Uh,
the last one, Gluten Away. That's a product that you've introduced recently.
Yeah. So there's two facts about gluten that scared us to where we wanted to create this product. Number one, as it turns out, 100% of people get intestinal transient permeability when they get exposed to gluten, right? It used to be just the celiacs, celiacs cannot handle gluten. Well, that's about 2% of the population, so it's not that many people. And then we started discovering, wait a minute, there's a whole group of people called non-celiac gluten intolerant people, right? Which means that they have profound response, but they don't have the enteropathy that's associated with celiac. That makes up like somewhere around 15-20% of people. So between those two, that's already a large piece of the population. But then there are new studies over the last 3 years that have been published that shows that 100% of people get transient permeability in the intestines when gluten arrives into your gut. And when it does, it's increasing that inflammatory response in your body, right? So that is scary in itself. So we are all sensitive to gluten.
Well, to be clear, you mentioned the permeability. Permeability is the opening up of the cells of the gut. So it becomes leaky gut for a short period of time. And I've seen this in a petri dish with pictures of human cells where there's tight junctions. You add gluten and they open up. And then same thing with glyphosate or Roundup. It's actually even more. And when the two are together, it's even more. And so you're saying 100% of the people that have gluten, there's a temporary leaky gut effect. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So it's temporary damage, right? But what happens is your body kind of swoops in and starts to try to repair it, and it may repair it just fine until your next meal. So for years, it may allow the damage, repair it, but there happens to be a time that comes where the repair slows down because of other compromising factors like GMOs and glyphosates and so on that really disrupt the system. And then the repair doesn't happen so fast anymore. And then it stays more leaky for a longer period of time. And then the next meal compounds on that and compounds on that. So ultimately, then it causes a total breakdown of the system. So that is a fact that's really prominent and important to note. And so everybody should be trying to avoid gluten. So then people say, well, okay, I'll just go on a gluten-free diet. Well, that's awesome. And that's a great way to approach it. The problem is the American Journal of Gastroenterology published a study last year that showed that up to 50% of gluten-free foods have gluten in it. And so you might be
a small amount,
a small, tiny fraction, right?
But
yeah,
that's still important.
Absolutely. I mean, but lots of exposure to it creates this permeability, right? So our thinking was you need to have some sort of defense against this. And so we formulated this really specialized enzyme product that not only targets the gluten peptides, all of them, the gluten glide and all of those peptides, it cuts it from the outside, so it's called an exopeptidase, and inside as well. So it basically cuts the gluten peptide completely into amino acids, but it starts the work in the stomach. That's what's really important because we want to cut the gluten peptides and all that in the stomach so they don't actually enter the intestines and cause this leakiness.
All right, and you're frozen the screen, but I think you're still, yep, we're back now. So I understand that the vast majority of it, maybe 99% or so, is destroyed in the stomach before it gets into the intestines.
Yeah, the gluten itself, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, it is, and that's where we actually want the work to happen anyway. And that's where we design the enzymes so they were enzymes that work in the stomach, so that it can work with the stomach acid to basically eliminate as many gluten and peptides as you possibly can, so that you have less of this profound leakiness that gets in. And the reason why that's important now, because we may not be thinking about gluten at this point, but the thing is, it's all about building resiliency right now, right? That's the best thing we can do because there's no treatment for this virus. There's no treatment for the illness that it creates. So our best chance right now is to improve our resiliency. So should we come in contact with it, we have a better chance of of a favorable outcome. And part of that resiliency is removing things that cause our system to be compromised.
And I want to say, you say there's no treatment, although there's many protocols, and some people have had good effects with them. So I just want to be clear about that. Now, you take the gluten away with a meal. Do you when you have the gluten, can you have the pizza and the bagels and the croissants and the baguettes? Can you just be eating wheat like you would want to?
Right.
I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of very upset people right now. So you
Of course. Yeah, we don't think of this as the get out of jail card for just going and having a gluten party. It's really more designed for like that incidental exposure. But if you're going to be like the kids are going crazy, being locked up in the house, and that okay, ordering them pizza is going to dampen the tension a little bit more, so you're going to eat pizza that night, and so taking it will at least help negate some of the negative effects.
How many pills per slice of pizza?
Yeah. Actually, that's a good question you asked. Like the label will say just one capsule with the meal, and that's the actual dose. But in fact, if the volume of the meal is going to be larger, and that, hey, I am actually going to eat gluten at this meal, and there's going to be a couple of different sources, you can actually take more. You could take 2 or 3 capsules if you need to, because enzymes work on a lock and key mechanism, and they have their specific targets, right? So when you have more targets, having more enzymes helps.
So does it help with digesting the cheese as well of the pizza?
No, it actually doesn't. It doesn't actually. Wait a minute. It might, because we do have a couple of probiotic strains in there. We have Saccharomyces boulardii in there, which increases the production of lactic acid, which helps break down dairy proteins as well. And then we've got a couple of the spores in there as well. And the spores will, of course, produce the protease enzymes that help break down dairy proteins.
So you've mentioned 5 different supplements: the probiotic, the prebiotic, IgG, the K2-7, and the gluten away. And you're recommending that we get all of them for our medicine cabinet and take it on a regular basis, gluten with the meals. If someone can't afford that now, there's a lot of people struggling financially. Is there one thing that's more important, or 2 things that are more important? Help us with setting priorities.
Yeah. So top priority, without a doubt, is the probiotic. So start with that, because that does so much of the work already for you. And then if you can go beyond that and get one more thing, the IgG. So the probiotic and the IgG, to me, are the 2 really, really critical ones.
You do the IgG more than the prebiotic, even though the prebiotic can increase. All right.
Yeah, even more. And the reason for that is because we already get some increase with the probiotic of the keystone strains, and maybe people can try to get more resistant starches in their diet if they can't afford the prebiotic, but you can't replace anything in diet to make up the function of the IgG. So those 2 things together are very powerful for the system.
And for those that can afford, I'm going to go overboard in another way.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier to change our habits so that after this time, we're still following that habit.
Mm-hmm.
We're providing, or Just Thrive is providing, a discount now. So if you can afford it, you may consider getting several months worth, because then if you're in a habit and you have it, you're committing to that. I'm saying this because behavior change messaging, I know from convincing people and working with them for so long, to change their diet to non-GMO and to change their diet to organic, making a commitment up front and investing somehow in that commitment is a much higher likelihood that they're going to continue with that. So you set up in the beginning, make it a habit so that you emerge from this time with a habit. If you can afford it and these things are appealing to you and they're at a discount, you may want to invest so that you have some. And so that when you run out, you don't forget, and then you just don't do it. And then, like me with the K2-7, you owe me several months of life.
Exactly. No, I think that's such an important message. And I myself are doing that. I can be myself notoriously bad about being regular with my supplements, being regular with things like a certain type of mindfulness work, exercise. And I'm setting myself a schedule because I'm home, and trying to really ingrain that into my behavior. Tiny habits. It's just tiny changes. and I'm setting bottles in particular places that I see at particular times of day, so I remember. I put some bottles in a cabinet that I always go to get my morning cup of coffee in there, my morning mug for my cup of coffee. So I open the cabinet, I go, oh, yep, I got to take that. So small things like that. We got to program those in because we will get through this pandemic. There's no doubt about that. But when we come out of it, we want to come out smarter, healthier, stronger, because then it's going to impact us in a positive way the rest of our lives.
Yeah, I put my gluten away on the table next to where I eat my food.
Exactly.
I still forget sometimes. It's like, oh, what's that? Like later. So I'm going to just summarize what I think you said, and then I'd like you to jump in and add anything. So we've been struggling with if you haven't noticed, we've been cutting this up every few minutes. The internet shuts down and we have to start and stop. So I think we probably will do a good job tying it together, but we have been moving very quickly so in case we were going to lose the internet altogether. So now is the time to give any longer stories about any piece that we missed. So the probiotic is unique in that it increases certain superhero strains that can create diversity, reduce pathogens, improve the output like the short-chain fatty acids, and create all this detoxification, immune strength, and digestion. Is there anything that we want to add about the probiotic before we go on to the prebiotic?
So arguably, its most important effect, especially now in light of this condition, is that leakiness of the gut. Okay. Right, because leaky gut is the biggest source of chronic low-grade inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation drives the expression of these ACE2 receptors. The ACE2 receptors are the target for the virus. And also, your gut controls 70+% of your immune tissue and immune function. And that's where it's decided how your immune system responds to all kinds of things that enter your system. In the case of the virus, it's going to enter in through your nose or your mouth or your eyes, because we keep touching our faces and putting it in there. And so how the immune system responds in those areas to the virus is dictated by what's going on in the gut. And the less inflamed, the less dysfunctional gut microbiome is, the more robust and profound your immune response is going to be. So those two really, really important aspects are critical to remember and understand about the probiotic.
Fantastic. 1 pill a day?
1 pill a day, that's it. Now, let's say you're feeling sniffly. There's still the common cold going around, still the flu going around. If you feel compromised at all, you can go to 2 caps a day, and you can take them both at the same time. You don't separate it out. Just take them both at the same time with any meal of the day, so you get a little bit added protection.
Okay. Prebiotic, the summary that I've got is it's the food that feeds the probiotic. And you've picked it up very specifically. You formulated these things. You've tested. You figured out what it is that you can give it. And then it increases the amount of the superhero strains by up to 1,000-fold and their output by as much as 3-fold. And so it's basically you've given the critters, now give them the food. Anything else I'm missing?
So yeah, absolutely. So the critical part about that is it is a precision prebiotic. That's the part we really have to hone in on, because lots of prebiotics out there in the market are kind of general food for bacteria. They can feed bad bacteria as well as they feed good bacteria. So if you've got an imbalance already going on and you take a bunch of prebiotic, you're going to strengthen the bad bacteria even more, or can do that. And that's a risk. That's why we went in with this idea of a precision prebiotic. These oligosaccharides that are in here specifically feed the superhero strains. And we have clinically published studies demonstrating that.
Beautiful. Okay, the IgG. Our body produces IgG. It's part of the immune system. Anyone that's had an allergy, or they'll know that there's an IgG response. And it's the body's own response, and it can grab and neutralize the invaders. It can also reduce the inflammation. And what we're doing is we're just giving more ammo to the body so that we have that IgG available in pill form to enhance the ability of the body to do what it's wanting to do anyway. How did I do?
Yeah, that's perfect. Am I frozen? Can you hear me?
You're okay.
Okay. So yes, that's actually perfect. Just the overarching message here is that your immune system has a lot to deal with all the time. Whether you're sick or not. And in fact, if you're not sick, which means you're not showing symptoms, it likely means your immune system is dealing with something that it's doing such a good job that you actually don't feel it, right? So we are constantly being exposed to stuff that the immune system has to help us with. Now, in that time of constant function, if now all of a sudden you've got to deal with this new novel virus that your system has never seen, that's when your system gets overwhelmed and the response becomes really delayed, really slow, and you can have a negative response to the virus itself. So the idea here is to kind of support the immune system by providing it with tools that reduces its job and its function, because now you're providing it with immunoglobulins that are going to go into your gut and actually deal with a lot of things that are already causing toxicity. And so you're kind of just giving a helping hand to your immune system to bring down its load. So should you come in contact with this virus, your immune system hopefully will have more capability of dealing with it.
All right, so it's calling for backup.
Yeah.
All right. Now, K2-7, it's important if you're taking vitamin D, because if you take vitamin D, it can reduce the amount of it. You need to add more. So if you're doing vitamin D for this, then that. I'm just trying to remember everything you said.
Yep.
And then it can reduce the all-cause mortality by 30%, the heart attacks, or is it heart mortality?
Cardiovascular death.
Cardiovascular death by 50%, with only 9% of the amount that's in your pill. And that it's this wonder thing that can even expand your life, according to one study, and these studies are not minor, they're major. Okay, is there anything about K2-7 that I didn't say that we need to know about?
The mitochondria side.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yep, because they are the powerhouses of your cell. Aging and age-related disorders are all characterized by dysfunctional mitochondria. When those powerhouses of your cells start to diminish in function and number, that is the primary indication for aging from a pathology standpoint.
Yeah, you take a tissue of a young person and an old person, you compare them. What's different?
That's the only difference they found, and that's been published, where they look at the two tissues. One was from a 5-year-old and one was from a 90-year-old. The only difference that the pathologist could see was the 90-year-old had almost 95% dysfunctional mitochondria. The 5-year-old had 100% functioning mitochondria. That's the difference. That's why a 5-year-old can run around the house eating this much food and having boundless energy. And as you get older, it becomes harder and harder to get out of bed, right? Because your body cannot ramp up the energy it needs to function. And that includes your immune system. Your immune system is an army that's out there functioning every second of every day, looking for stuff that's invading your system. And a lot of that energy is dependent on how the mitochondria in those cells work. Vitamin K2 has been shown to increase mitochondrial output by almost 40%. And it can even rescue and repair damaged mitochondria. This was in a animal model of Parkinson's that was published in Belgium. We've published 2 studies on neuropathy. These are people who experience a numbness, tingling in the peripheries. Sometimes it's very painful as well. We published 2 studies showing an 80% reduction in that neuropathy symptoms in as little as 4 to 6 weeks.
Wow.
We're just adding in the K2 because it's regenerating that mitochondria. So that cannot be overstated as not only importance outside of a pandemic, but even during a pandemic. You need your cells functioning in tip-top shape in order to protect you.
Yeah, we talk about the mitochondria damage from GMOs and Roundup is probably driving the fatigue and the brain fog.
Totally.
Because when people get off of it, they have greater energy and reduced brain fog because it's the energy centers. When people have the K2, do they find more energy often?
Absolutely. So it's interesting. You find 2 things. You find more energy, but it's sustained energy. So it's not the kind that you get from drinking a 5-hour energy and you're jittery and function and ramped up. It's kind of sustained energy where you just notice that, wait a minute, I'm not as sleepy, I'm not as tired. It's not as hard getting out of bed in the morning. Those are the things you start to notice pretty quickly. The other thing people notice is it actually improves your sleep quite dramatically. And we were trying to figure out why that would be, because people were reporting this to us all the time when we would give them high doses of K2. And then we did a very small, simple study to look at K2's function in the sympathetic parasympathetic pathway. And as it turns out, K2 improves something called sympathovagal tone. And that is how well your parasympathetic system functions. And so that parasympathetic activation is important for calming down and for also relaxing and sleeping. So that's a whole other thing that vitamin K2 does. And that's why I call it the omnipotent vitamin, because it's so powerful. It does so many important things. And here's the crux. There's at least 2 published studies that show that the Western population is clinically deficient in vitamin K2. So that clinical deficiency is hallmarked because we get almost no vitamin K2 in our diet, right? You might, if you eat a lot of organ meat, or if you eat animal brains, or if you eat lots of butter, you might get some. There is some in those meals, but not anywhere close to the clinically relevant dose that we need in the Western population. So everybody, 90+% of the Western population is clinically deficient in this absolutely essential vitamin.
I got to tell you, this was one of the gifts to me of our interview.
Yeah.
I've been, carrying around in my medicine cabinet K2, and I take it from time to time, but I'm a convert.
Every day, you got to do it every day. It's so important.
All right, and the final one was gluten away, which you take in a meal so that it breaks down the gluten before it gets to the intestines, so that it doesn't create that temporary permeability or leaky gut, and that it doesn't, and so that we don't react to it in the intestines like when people have. And it's particularly important for people who are trying to avoid gluten. They can take it at the beginning of a meal. So if there's gluten that gets stuck in there because it's like oats are transported in the same grain train as wheat, and they end up with wheat there, or you end up with pastas, which are often gluten-free, but they still have some wheat in them because of the way that things are made, then it can help break down that gluten before it gets to the intestines.
Exactly. Yep. That really summarizes it. Just highlight that the large-scale study published in the American Journal of Gastroenterology showed that such a high percentage of gluten-free foods tend to have some gluten contamination in it.
Right.
So even if you're doing all you can do to be diligent to avoid it, the likelihood of cross-contamination is still there and it's prevalent. So, this just protects you that little bit. And why would we talk about it right now during this pandemic? Well, anything that can compromise your constitution or your resilience can add to a potential negative response to this virus, right? So anything that drives inflammation, anything that creates inflammation in the gut, which will then hamper your immune system, can become a problem. So we're just trying to illustrate everything that you can do so that you can really reduce your risk of this type of inflammatory response and make yourself more resilient.
Great. Kieran, this has been fantastic. Thank you. I love how quick your mind works. I remember when I interviewed you for the 90-day lifestyle upgrade, I gave you each of these 28 different conditions without giving you any advance notice. And you just we just found some metabolic pathway related to the gut bacteria that was damaged by Roundup to show, oh yeah, this disease and this disease and this disease and this disease all can be partially explained by the changes in the gut bacteria produced by Roundup. So I'm glad that we tried the speed dating variety of these. So I'm glad we did it twice too. It's an easier way for people to learn, to hear the same thing twice. And so we had some repetition and some additions. I want to tell people again, we have arranged a discount with Just Thrive. You can see that either on the email where you got this or on the page where this is posted. And part of your purchase will also support our work at educating people. And I want to thank you for all tuning in, but I also want to say that this is a time that unlike anything anyone has ever experienced in our lives, and there is no manual. So people are just trying to do what they can. We're pulling out of calling our friends like Kieran and saying, what do you got? What do you got? And everyone seems to be saying at the same time, because this is a transformation period, because this is uncharted territory, we get to set the charting. We get to set the compass and the direction so that we emerge as better people, as better communities, and as a better world. So it's really an exciting time. And a lot of people don't notice that. They think about the fear. So I'm inviting people to reframe this, as an opportunity of global transformation and emergence. And the way we do that is by making it personal transformation and emergence, and then stepping up as leaders to inspire others to do the same. So feel free to share these words or to share this interview with others, and safe eating, everyone.